Mormon historian confirms that the Mormon Church does believe in polygamy. Next, on Polygamy, what love is this?
She was born into polygamy. Her family followed the teachings of Joseph Smith. All of them, including plural marriage, especially plural marriage. Like many young girls, she had been promised to a man who was her father's age. But she fled. She ran away. She preferred an eternity of outer darkness to a life of polygamy. She chose hell over religious enslavement. That girl was me. After I fled, I thought I was free, but I realized I wasn't free. I was lost, alone, desolate. No home, no hope, no life. Then Jesus Christ found me and rescued me, and He loved me. In His love, I found real freedom, a real home, a real life. And Jesus offers you the very same thing. He is a shield to all who will take refuge in Him. He has been a refuge for me, and He can be for you too. Knowing the surpassing love of Jesus Christ today, this is why I can look back and ask, polygamy, what love is this?
Welcome to our show tonight. This is Polygamy, What Love Is This? And I'm your host, Doris Hanson. And we are here every Thursday night at this time to bring relevant information to our viewers about the polygamy that Joseph Smith taught was the way into God's heaven and exaltation of the faithful polygamist. An announcement for our viewers before we get started. Our viewers who are out of a polygamist environment, who are thinking of getting out and would like to meet and talk with others who have trod that road before them. We are having a support group, or a discussion group as we call it, on February 24th at 6:30 p.m. and that's Monday night, and we welcome people from every Mormon polygamy group or polygamy environment who are questioning or have been questioning or having doubts. We do not encourage you to doubt your doubts. We encourage you to investigate your doubts, and that's what you should be doing. And if you want to do that, you're invited to come to this discussion group. You can email us, tv@aboutpolygamy.com, for full information of where it's going to be. And we encourage those who have been in a false religion to seek a support group or a support system that will help you. Sometimes it can be very difficult, but the freedom and the finding the truth is certainly well worth it. So that's February 24th, 6:30 p.m. We'd love to have you, and bring a friend. Also, on Tuesday, February 18th, I've been invited to speak at Brigham City to talk about polygamy today and parts of my own life, being born and raised in a polygamy group and in a polygamy family. And it's going to be at Main Street Church at Brigham City. The address is 48 North Main. We'll start about noon. And I'd like to invite anyone who would like to come on up, and maybe I can make new acquaintances and also new friends, and also meet some of old friends there as well. So that's next Tuesday, February 18th at noon. And a short comment for our critics. We received a few remarks about the content of last week's show when we critiqued the article on polygamy as posted by the Mormon Church on LDS.org. Now, their article there explaining early Mormon polygamy was deceitful at best. However, we were criticized because we talked about the LDS Church when they say we are only supposed to talk about polygamy. Well, the entire show was about polygamy. From beginning to end, every bit of our show was about polygamy. And if you cannot be honest enough with yourself to accept the fact that the Mormon Church is neck deep in polygamy, we can't help that. We tell it like it is, and we produce all the historical references to back it up. And we're sorry that you were offended by hearing the truth, but we will never apologize for telling the truth. And what did we say that wasn't true? You know, those who depend upon polygamy for eternal life also depend upon the Mormon Church for their scriptures, and they are directly affected by any changes that the LDS has made and does make to the Book of Mormon, the Pearl of Great Prize, the Doctrine and Covenants, and so on. And recently, they have made some changes to their scriptures, and some of these changes are rather amazing. So the first half of our show tonight, we're going to focus on some of those changes, and the second half, we are going to briefly discuss the apostasy in Sweden as it pertains to the sanitized history of Joseph Smith and their lack of transparency and honesty in portraying the truth about his polygamy and other doctrines to which the Mormon fundamentalists cling. So for this discussion, we have our returning guest, whom we always love to have here with us, and who is always up to date on what's going on in this culture, and who has forgotten more than most of us will ever know about our topic. I would like to introduce and welcome our guest tonight, Sandra Tanner.
Good to be here.
It's good to have you again.
Yes, all right.
In our little adventure here as we do this. So for viewers perhaps who are not familiar with what you do, would you like to briefly explain what you do? And we'll put on the screen your address and the name of your ministry.
Utah Lighthouse Ministry. We're at 1358 South West Temple in Salt Lake City, Utah. Our web page is utlm.org. And I'm there most days during the week. People can stop in the bookstore and talk to me. And we have just a ton of material on our website that tells about the different problem areas of Mormonism, Bible verses comparing Christianity and Mormon doctrine, plus just all sorts of pages on the historical aspects of Mormonism, how it's changed through the years.
Yeah, there's a lot of wonderful information there. It's very good. So I encourage you to go there, 1358 Southwest Temple, across the street from the ball field, right?
Yes.
And you also, your ministry also produces newsletters, I think maybe twice a year.
Yes.
And tonight we're going to be talking about two of those newsletters from last year. And it's called, the newsletter is called the Salt Lake City Messenger. So how would our viewers get a hold of your newsletter?
Well, they can either email me at sandra@utlm.org, or they can go to our website, and on the order form you can request to receive the newsletters or to be put on the mailing list.
Okay, because when you find out what we're talking about tonight, you may want to get a hold of both of the newsletters we're going to be discussing. The first one that we're going to talk about is newsletter 120. And it is entitled "What's Hidden in the New Headings." I think a graphic of this will go up on the screen. And it's talking about the changes that have been made in the LDS scriptures. Of course, we don't have time to go through all of the changes, but enough so that we can give them an idea and they can get your newsletter and read the whole thing. So the recent changes in the scriptures, in a nutshell, when were these revisions or adjustments in their text made, and are they now printed up in their books?
Well, they announced this last year, but if you went online to the LDS website and looked at their scriptures, they would have that current edition with the corrections made up on the internet. However, I don't know if they've yet come out to purchase in the stores with the changes.
Okay.
The last paperback copy I got of their scriptures it still did not show those adjustments.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure at what point their stock runs out of the old printing and they get new printing in. But it's on the internet. The scriptures they currently have on their website show that.
Okay, good.
Show the new headings and changes.
The new headings, so they can compare what we're talking about tonight by going on the website to do that. A valid question that people would ask is, if the Mormon God doesn't change and his decrees are unalterable, how do they dare change what they previously said God said? I mean,
Yeah, well, in this case, they aren't really so much changes to what would be termed scripture. They're to the introductions to the chapters or the different articles that they have finessed the wording on. So a Mormon could say, well, that's not really our scriptures, that's just the introduction to our scriptures. But there have been changes made in the actual text of the revelations and scriptures themselves,
Right.
which they can see on our website. We talk about the different ones in different articles on our website. But the changes that they've just made this last year were to the introduction and headings to different articles in their scriptures, which shows a change in their perception of how they market their story. Instead
Right.
of the old claims where they made specific claims about the American Indian being the descendants of the American Indian, of the Book of Mormon peoples, they're toning it down. They're toning down statements about polygamy. They're toning down statements on race, which all shows how they're moving to be more, trying to be more acceptable to the world today, whereas their statements in the past were much more specific. Now they're getting more generalized. It's just part of this whole process of making Mormonism more acceptable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's start with the Book of Abraham. In the now this is the book in the beginning is the of the Pearl of Great Price. It talks about the Book of Abraham, and so
Right.
that's where we're talking here. In the 1981 introduction of the Pearl of Great Price, when it as regarded the Book of Abraham, it says, and we're going to put these up on the screen side by side so you can see the differences. On the 1981 introduction, it reads, the Book of Abraham, a translation from some Egyptian papyri that came into the hands of Joseph Smith in 1835, containing writings of the patriarch Abraham. The 2013 changes will read, the Book of Abraham, an inspired translation of the writings of Abraham. Joseph Smith began the translation in 1835 after obtaining some Egyptian papyri. So, Sandra, explain these changes to us.
Well, there has been so much written about the Book of Abraham not being a translation from the papyri that Joseph bought, that the Mormon Church realizes they've got to back off from the specific claims they've made in the past. And so while this 1981 says that specifically that it's a translation from some papyri, that's a specific claim, that the papyri contained the Book of Abraham. And so now they're backing off from that because the LDS leaders know, Egyptologists say there is nothing in that papyri that says anything about Abraham.
Right.
So now they want to paint it as though, oh, well, he looked at the papyri and then he got a revelation about the Book of Abraham. And they're trying to finesse a distance between the text of the Book of Abraham and the papyri. But up until Egyptologists started talking about all this in the last 20 years, it was all specifically, it was translated from the papyri.
Yeah, translated. That's
Translated.
exactly what I ever learned was translated. So now they're going to say it's inspired rather than translated.
Yeah.
And so, but he needed that in order to get the inspiration, I guess.
Well, that's the question. If you're not going to literally translate the papyri, why would Smith spend $2,400 to purchase the papyri in Kirtland, Ohio? This is in 1835 when the Mormon Church is going broke.
Yeah.
And you would spend that much church money to buy these. If they weren't really what you were translating, why would you spend the money on it? Why couldn't you just look at the book of Genesis
And get an inspiration.
and get an inspiration from that for the writings of Abraham? So in the beginning, it was very specific that these papyri were really written by Abraham, and he was going to translate it. And now we had the true story from not Genesis corrupt version. We got the real deal now.
Yeah, and then we find out that isn't even true anyway. So, and they also removed the heading of the Book of Abraham at the beginning of a book. It said translated from the papyrus by Joseph Smith. Now they've completely removed that.
Yeah, they keep tweaking things so that they can more and more move away from the specific claim of translating and speak now in terms of it's an inspired document. It's an inspired scripture instead of translated scripture.
Instead of translated. So beginning with the introduction to the Book of Mormon. So
Yeah.
we're going to do the same comparison here with the changes. In the first sentences of the 1981 edition, we read, "The Book of Mormon is a volume of Holy Scripture comparable to the Bible. It is a record of God's dealings with the ancient inhabitants of the Americas and contains, as does the Bible, the fullness of the everlasting gospel." Now, the new scriptures
Version.
coming out has removed, as does the Bible. So the Bible used to carry it, and now it doesn't. Is that what they're saying? What is this all about? Why would they remove the Bible?
Well, I think in the beginning, when they first put that phrase in there, they're trying to put the Christian world at ease. We're not trying to supplant the Bible. We're trying to teach the same things as the Bible, as they try to get a foothold into the Christian community and get people to convert into the movement. But then somewhere along the line, I am assuming someone pointed out to the church leaders, well, if the Bible has all the gospel in it, then why did we need the later scriptures?
Exactly.
So, moment of thought, okay, we'll take that out. So that doesn't say that the Bible also contains the whole gospel, because you have to make room for why you need Mormon scriptures. So now they edited the phrase out, so it doesn't tell you that the Bible also contained all the doctrine.
Okay, and in my opinion, it seems like what they're doing is they're just devaluing the Bible and its worth in studying.
Right.
Which they already have pretty much devalued that anyway about its translation. Mormon fundamentalists, they continue with the original racism of Mormonism.
Right.
And as far as I know, none of them have, maybe individually, but at least as far as groups and communities, none of them have embraced the 1978 changes that the Mormon Church made regarding the blacks. And the Book of Mormon continues to hold racist accusations, teaching that bad people have black skin and good people have white skin.
Right.
And so they've made some changes in their headings regarding all of this, in which the late DNA also makes it relevant. Regarding the Lamanites, and we're going to put this up on the screen again, the introduction to the 1981 Book of Mormon, we read, "After thousands of years, all were destroyed except the Lamanites, and they are the principal ancestors of the American Indians." And this has been changed to read, "After thousands of years, all were destroyed except the Lamanites, and they are among the ancestors of the American Indians." This may not seem very significant, but really it's very significant.
Right. When I was growing up in Mormonism, I was taught that the Book of Mormon was about the forefathers of the American Indians. They were Israelites that came over here, the main group 600 BC, and spread all over the Americas. And so in my childhood, we were taught every Indian in North and South America, as well as the Polynesians and Islanders, were all Book of Mormon peoples. They were all descended from those people. And the reason you had dark Indians when Columbus comes over here is because they're all the descendants of the dark people in the Book of Mormon story. But as science and research on the Americas has progressed, anthropologists all know that the American Indians are not Israelites. They're all from Siberia, descend from people coming over the Bering Straits and from this area of Siberia. And DNA has confirmed this. I mean, the theory was already there before DNA, but DNA established, yes, in fact, the chain for their ancestry does take them back to Siberia. It doesn't take them back to Israel.
Right.
And so as DNA has become more and more of a problem for the Mormons on this, they now have finessed this statement again, because how do you explain that none of the Indians have Semitic DNA?
Yeah.
So they say, oh, well, they're just some small group and they got lost in the shuffle. And so what you have is DNA from all these other people that were in the land that weren't the Book of Mormon people, or else the Book of Mormon people so intermixed with this bigger group of non-Book of Mormon peoples that were already here in the land that it's washed out their DNA. Well, the whole Book of Mormon story is that the land of America was saved for a remnant of God's people to bring them over here to an empty land. I mean, that's specifically the claims in the Book of Mormon that are coming into an empty land. Science refutes that today. No, there were Indians here before the Book of Mormon period.
Right.
And so Mormon scholars realize they've got to back down on these claims. We no longer can say the Book of Mormon happened all over North and South America and the Polynesian Islands. We got to even get more fuzzy than that. We don't even know where any Lamanite is.
Right.
So today they don't even know who's a Book of Mormon person.
That's right. They sure don't. Absolutely. And of course that, well, let's go further on. We got a lot to talk about. The heading for 2nd Nephi chapter 5 has been reworded, and so we're going to talk about that one now. The 1981 edition of 2nd Nephi chapter 5 read, "Because of their unbelief, the Lamanites are cursed. Receive a skin of blackness and become a scourge unto the Nephites." Now it reads, "Because of their unbelief, the Lamanites are cut off from the presence of the Lord, are cursed, and become a scourge unto the Nephites." So again, we have a very significant change where the removal of the skin of blackness is taking place. And explain what that's all about. And the text of that chapter, has it changed?
No, that's what's funny. You read the chapter, and the whole chapter is about the Lamanites being black-skinned, cursed people with their skin color. So the heading has been modified to predispose you to not think about the black skin. Whereas before it made a point of it, now they don't bring it up to your mind. I guess they hope that when you read through, it won't hit you that, oh my goodness, that this is kind of racist, that some people are made dark because God's mad at them and cursed them.
Yeah, it's their way of programming you to see things their way. And yet in the text it still calls them a dark and a loathsome, filthy people.
Right.
And if you've got white skin, you're good and righteous, and if you've got dark skin, you're wicked and evil.
Right, and this is one of the curious things with the Mormons have lately been putting up different statements under their gospel topics. And one of the statements they put up dealt with these kind of racial issues that have been in Mormonism's past. But it doesn't solve the problem of the racism that's inherent in the whole Book of Mormon story.
Exactly.
Good guys are white, bad guys are dark or black.
Well, in the Book of Abraham.
Book of Abraham has
some
racist stuff in it as well. Yes.
And again, I'd like to mention that these the polygamists, the Mormon fundamentalists, hold on to these scriptures. They buy them, they read them, they study them, they teach them, just like the mainstream Mormon church does.
And the polygamists were very, very upset when the Mormons gave priesthood to blacks back in '78. In fact, some of the polygamist people ran a whole full-page ad in the Salt Lake Tribune denouncing this new change.
You can't change scripture.
Yes.
That's right. Okay, let's talk about plural marriage in the Book of Mormon. The old heading for Jacob chapter 2, which is kind of a significant chapter regarding polygamy. The old heading said, men should seek riches to help their fellow man, dash. Jacob condemns the unauthorized practice of plural marriage, dash. The Lord delights in the chastity of women. Now the new heading says, men may seek riches to help their fellow men. The Lord commands that no man among the Nephites may have more than one wife. The Lord delights in the chastity of women. So they've made some change regarding plural marriage. What's the change? And explain that significance.
Well, the old heading would make it possible for a Mormon to justify in his own mind why Joseph Smith could live polygamy, or why the early church leaders could, because you couldn't live it unless God commanded you to do it. They don't even want you to think about the fact that God might command you to do it, so they rephrased this sentence that none of the people in the Book of Mormon guys, they weren't supposed to take more than one wife. So it's a downplaying of their previous defenses of why you could go into polygamy.
Interesting, very interesting. I find in the last phrase of that where it says God delights in the chastity of women, and he didn't change that.
No.
But I wonder, doesn't he delight in the chastity of men?
One would wonder.
Yeah, why did he choose to say women there? And then as I was thinking about that one time, I thought, well, something is desperately wrong with a God who delights in the chastity of women, but promotes promiscuity of man through polygamy.
Right. And with Joseph Smith's practice of polygamy, you have God supposedly promoting lying to practice it, to sneak behind his own wife and lie to the church, lie to the public to perform this.
Right.
And so how are these young women that he approaches supposed to handle this problem, this contradiction, when their scriptures say they only believe in having one wife, and the prophet comes to you privately and talks to you about polygamy? Now, be sure you don't tell Emma or anyone about this.
Yeah.
How is that helping the chastity of women if you can go to them privately and ask them to go into a practice that publicly you're denouncing?
Especially when some of those women were married women.
Yes.
And if God delights in the chastity of women, why would Joseph Smith
married
work
women
to make them unchaste?
Right.
There's something definitely wrong with that. Okay, let's go to the apostasy in Sweden. And that is your newsletter number 121. It's there up on the screen. And people might wonder, what's this got to do with polygamy? It's got a lot to do with it, because I think that's part of why these questions started to come up. Before we get started, give our viewers a brief background information on why this meeting in Sweden took place, what happened, what was the precipitating event.
The man that's pictured on the front of our newsletter, Hans Mattsson, he was an Area 70 in Sweden. And so he had a fairly high level of leadership for the LDS Church in Europe. And he started having different members come to him with questions about early Mormon history. And one of the things people were asking him about was polygamy and Joseph marrying all these different women, teenagers and married women. And so this man, as their spiritual leader, starts looking into it to find out how to answer it. And so he starts finding there's all kind of problems. Now, this is back in 2005. And he starts talking to different people, and soon he's got 600 different Mormons all on an internet group discussing these problem areas of Mormon history. So the church becomes aware of this, and in 2005 they sent an apostle and some different men out to talk to some of the people there, telling them they're going to give them answers and stuff. Hang on, we're dealing with it. And the years go by, and there doesn't seem to be coming real resolution. In 2010, some more apostles and church historians come out to talk to this group of people in Sweden. Finally, there's this meeting of couple dozen Swedes with different leadership of the church, and the two Mormon historians come out, plus the Swedish leadership was also at this meeting. And so this was a chance for all these people to tell the leaders what their historical issues were. And of course, one of the issues was polygamy, but it was also on blacks and the priesthood. It was on Book of Mormon, how it was translated, DNA, the Book of Abraham. There were many different questions that came up, but they've never been resolved. And I think that the recent statements the church has put up on their gospel topics page, where they've recently done, they did one on the first vision, they did one on the Book of Mormon, and they did one on Book of Mormon DNA, and they did one on blacks in the priesthood, and they did this one on polygamy and post-manifesto polygamy. But those are not, they don't carry the answers any further than what these people were given.
No, they don't.
Clear back in 2005.
And they're still very blurry, even
Yes.
in that. They just deceive by trying
Yes.
to blur the issues. So there were basically 15 questions that you covered in your newsletter, and of course, we can't cover them all tonight,
Right.
but we're going to do with a couple of them. So let's begin with their question about the method of Joseph Smith's translation in the Book of Mormon. In 1888, Emma Smith, Joseph's wife and scribe, described the dictation process of the Book of Mormon to her son, and this is what she said, and I quote, "In writing for your father, I frequently wrote day after day, often sitting by the table close by him, he sitting with his face buried in his hat, with the stone in it, and dictating hour after hour with nothing between us." Now this is how she, Emma, his wife, said the translation loosely used, process took place for the Book of Mormon. Now there's a picture, we have a drawing of Joseph Smith with his head in his hat, and it's something that we recognize there, that's the way he wrote the Book of Mormon.
Yes, the people that were in the room when he did his transcribing, his dictation, their statements were all that he put his head in a hat, and then supposedly the stone would shine and he would be able to read the words off to the scribe, like Emma said, and the scribe would write them down. That's the way all the witnesses said it happened. Mm-hmm. But you never see in Mormon literature where they ever picture that.
Right.
All the pictures the Mormons have in their manuals and on their website of him doing a translation of the Book of Mormon shows him with the plates sitting on the table and him running his finger across the plates.
And there's a couple of them right there.
Of them. Yes, and that's the way they depict it. The historians all know that's not the way he did it.
Exactly.
The statements don't read that way. And that it's one of the examples of the deception they use on their members. This was one of the things that upset the people in Sweden.
Yeah.
Why do you present these things to us in one way when you know that historically they were done a different way?
Well, I have a quote here when they asked Turley his response.
Now Turley was one of the church historians.
And he was one of the ones that was there at the Swedish meeting. So it was somebody asked, and this is his answer to that question, quote, "The hat was apparently to block light out so that Joseph could see what he was doing with the record. Sometimes the light, affects your spirit. We don't know exactly how it works, but he did say this. In the early days of his translation, he was relying on revelatory tools of some sort or another, Urim and Thummim, seer stones, whatever the case may be." Now, why did he need the gold plates if all he needed was his hat?
Well, this is the problem, and this is why the church has not told the actual process, because the Urim and Thummim, he mentions, was supposedly an instrument God prepared that was saved with the plates so that when the plates were given to Joseph Smith and they were in a foreign language, he could use this Urim and Thummim, which was described as kind of spectacles, big spectacles they put on, that he could use those to translate through. This is an instrument God prepared and saved with the plates for him. And yet, according to the witnesses, he only used that for the first little bit of translating. The majority, what we have of the Book of Mormon today, the witnesses say was all done with this stone and a hat. And the problem is the stone and a hat is just a stone he found in a well that he used for money digging, for seance work, to find buried treasure.
Yeah.
And then he uses the same stone to translate the Book of Mormon.
The Book of
Well,
Mormon.
if God had saved for thousands of years this Urim and Thummim for the person to translate the Book of Mormon with, why does Joseph end up using a stone he found in a well? How could it work better? Be more convenient than what God prepared?
Exactly. Good question. And this worried the people in Sweden. They actually
they really worried about that.
And it should worry everybody, actually. Well, we need to take our break now. We're done with the first half hour. We still have a lot to go, but we also want to open up the telephone lines for our viewers. Anyone wants to call in, ask questions of Sandra, or add to the discussion at all, we would like to hear from you. Our number is 801-973-TV20, 801-973-8820. And as we wait for the calls to come in, we do have our message to share with you.
You are watching Polygamy, What Love Is This? Broadcasting live from Salt Lake City, Utah. This program is the broadcast outreach of a Shield and Refuge ministry. Shield and Refuge is a point of first contact for Mormon fundamentalists who question the doctrines of the religion or who are actively seeking for an opportunity to escape the polygamist lifestyle. Examining the claims of fundamentalist doctrine against the backdrop of biblical truth is central to our efforts. We invite you to contact us. Call toll-free at 877-425-9993 or email us at tv@aboutpolygamy.com. We want you to know that we have made available to you some outstanding resources free of charge. You will find them at our website, www.whatloveisthis.tv. There you will find the DVD, Lifting the Veil of Polygamy, which documents the real-life stories told firsthand of those who were lifted out of the culture of polygamy through the power and love of Jesus Christ. Also, free of charge to you is the booklet, Is Polygamy Biblical? It explores plural marriage in the context of God's Word and answers questions like, did God ever command polygamy? Is it part of God's plan? While you are at our website, make sure to take advantage of the archived episodes of this program, which can stream on demand directly to your computer. There are more than 100 shows to choose from. And if someone you know is unable to view this program via live broadcast, recommend that they visit this same website every Thursday at 8 p.m. Mountain Time to watch this show through live streaming video. Simply follow the links to the live streaming video page. If you are watching live tonight, we invite you to call us as we open our phone lines. The number is 801-973-TV20. That's 801-973-8820. Now, back to Polygamy, What Love Is This? With our host, Doris Hanson.
Welcome back to our show tonight. This is Polygamy, What Love Is This? Our guest is Sandra Tanner, and we are talking about some changes that have been made in the headings of the Mormon scriptures, which definitely directly affect the Mormon fundamentalists because they also rely upon the Mormon scriptures for their scriptures. And now we're talking about the meeting in Sweden where some LDS officials went over there to talk about some of the deep questions that the Swedish Mormons had regarding the history and the way history has been whitewashed to them, and they hadn't been told many things. Right now, I think we're going to go into the questions that they had about Joseph Smith's polygamy. Why don't you talk about your newsletter again? Maybe somebody just barely tuned in. Just to show the newsletter again, that
Yes.
how they can get a hold of one, because they may want some more information on
Right.
this.
You want to read about the Swedish situation. It's issue number 121, and it's called Apostasy in Sweden. It's on our website. Anyone can go to the website and read it. And it gives the references. The actual meeting when the church historians were there was recorded. You can actually go on the web and listen to this whole interview of the Swedes asking the different church historians questions. And they very specifically had a discussion about polygamy, where the leaders made some admissions that most Mormons would be surprised at. And I think you had one of the quotes there.
I do have one made by Turley. He's a historian.
Currently still assistant church historian.
Okay, and he was asked about Joseph Smith's polygamy and polyandry, and this is one of the answers he gave, and it'll go on the screen. Did Joseph Smith practice plural marriage? Yes. Many church members don't know it, but the answer is yes. Now, this is what he said. Did Joseph Smith practice polyandry, marrying women who already had living husbands? The answer is yes. Joseph Smith did practice polyandry. How many wives did Joseph Smith have? We're in the process, as you know, of preparing the papers of Joseph Smith for publication. We hope to include in the papers of Joseph Smith a list of Joseph Smith's wives based on the best available evidence. Well, I have a real problem with his non-answer here.
Yes.
You know, first of all, I've talked with many people, and I'm sure you've talked with many, many more than I ever have, of Mormons and ex-Mormons polygamists know better, but the Mormons will say, they call me liars and other names for even saying Joseph Smith was a polygamist or polyandry. They've accused me of all kinds of things, and here this church historian is admitting it's true.
Yes, and for the reader that doesn't realize that polyandry means that he had women for wives that had living husbands. And so the Doctrine and Covenants, section 132, only mentions a man having 10 virgins. There's nothing there about marrying married women.
Absolutely.
And here this church historian concedes Joseph practiced polygamy, he practiced polyandry, having women for wives that had living husbands. But then he tries to skirt around the whole thing by saying, well, we don't know exactly how many there were. We're working on a count. Well, there have already been great studies done. We have lists of the different women. Todd Compton's book in Sacred Loneliness is the biography of 33 of his plural wives. And George D. Smith's book, Nauvoo Polygamy, lists, I think it's 38 plural wives. So it's not like we're in the dark about this.
Well, he could even go to a previous historian, Andrew Jensen. He listed 28, and that was decades ago.
Right.
And they currently can't even come up with something that a previous historian did come up with. It's a delay tactic, and what is so discouraging about all this is the leadership are the deceivers, because they know the truth, and they're the ones that's covering up. They deceived them for decades and decades and decades. And don't the members deserve to know the truth?
Right. If a person is going to make an informed decision, you need to be able to look at both sides of an issue. If you go to buy a car, you want to check out what the Chevy dealer says about the Ford. You want to know what the Ford dealer says about the Chevy. You don't just go in and accept the salesman's word on everything. And so the same with the missionaries coming to people's door to convince them of Mormonism. You should look at both sides. What do people say about this product? What's the consumer guide to problems with the product? And the problem is Joseph Smith's claims don't stand up to investigation.
Right, exactly true. Now, we do have a list we're going to put on the screen of Joseph Smith's wives, where you can go on the web, www.wivesofjosephsmith.org, and you can go there. You can find a complete list of the wives, 34, including Emma, 34 of his wives, and more information about them. It's good, accurate information, and it's very easy to understand. So you can go there and learn more about Joseph Smith and his polygamy and his polyandry. Well, it looks like we have some questions coming in on the phone, so let's go to those, okay? So we have on line 1, Gorm from Sandy. Gorm, you're on the air.
Oh, hi.
Hello.
I have a question.
Okay.
If Joseph Smith stuck his head in a hat and looked at a rock to get the information for the Book of Mormon, what was the source material? In other words, he sat there hour after hour, day after day, looking at the rock. I'm suspecting the rock didn't really have any information on it. So how did he get the information? Did he make it up? Was it just all in his head? Where did that come from?
Well, we know from Joseph Smith's mother's biography of Joseph Smith that she says that as a young man, before the Mormon Church started, before he did the Book of Mormon, that he entertained the family with stories of the American Indian. It was a common discussion of the day. There were dozens of books printed speculating that the American Indian were from the lost tribes of Israel, so that the conversation around him would have given him the ideas and content for the Book of Mormon. I believe Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Mormon. I think he had sufficient imagination to put together from all the things he had heard in his community to put the book together. A lot of the Book of Mormon is just straight copied out of the Bible, King James English, which is a problem. So I think he had the resources to do that. The Book of Mormon is not that great a book. I mean, the Mormons are always talking about what a great book it is. It's very wordy. It shows the obvious hand of an uneducated person. The storylines repeat continually. You have one great civilization come over here at the time of the Tower of Babel, and they grew to millions and killed everybody off at the hill Cumorah. And then the Nephite Lamanite crowd comes over at 600 BC, grows to a great civilization. They end up killing everybody off at the same hill Cumorah all over again. B.H. Roberts, Mormon historian, wrote a book, Studies of the Book of Mormon, where he talks about how Joseph Smith's storyline is, for the Book of Mormon, is obviously drawn from things in his community and from his time.
So are you suggesting that's not the most perfect book ever written?
I certainly do not believe it is the most perfect book.
Okay. So basically all made up out of his imagination. And
Yes. Whether he had help from someone else like Oliver Cowdery, who knows? But the main storyline, I believe, is Joseph Smith's idea. Nephi seems to be Joseph Smith's alter ego. Here you have the younger brother who's going to save the family, and he's the one chosen by God. And so Nephi seems to be Joseph's idea of himself. I see things in the Book of Mormon that say to me, it's his idea.
so are you suggesting that Oliver Cowdery also may be one of the authors?
It's possible there could have been collusion there. Cowdery came from Vermont. Well, so did the Smiths. But Cowdery's family attended church where Ethan Smith, no relation to Joseph Smith, was the pastor. Ethan Smith wrote a book called View of the Hebrews that is not a storyline like the Book of Mormon, but it proposes many theories that show up in the Book of Mormon, that the American Indians are from the lost tribes of Israel. So there's many ideas I see in View of the Hebrews. Joseph could have been influenced by that. Cowdery was, I think, a third cousin of the Smiths. I think the families knew each other. The church doesn't admit to that, but I think they did. So I don't know. I don't know who all might have helped Joseph Smith, but the Book of Mormon, I think, clearly can be shown to be a product of the early 1800s. There are influences in it that show it's a book from that time period.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gorm, for calling. Okay, we have an off-the-air question. Has Hans Madsen left the LDS Church?
I don't think he has formally resigned. I don't know how much he goes. He moved from Sweden to Spain due to health reasons, I believe, and is retired now. In fact, that's why he left his position as Area 70 in Sweden, is because of heart problems. And he used his time of recuperating from surgery to do a lot of his study on Mormonism. So I don't think that he's active.
Yeah.
But like many people here in Utah that don't believe it, aren't active, they don't take their name off because of implications for family and friends.
Okay, so, now we have on line 2, Niven from Roy. Hello, Niven.
Hi, how are you?
Good, you're on the air.
Yeah, the issue of polygamy, do you gals think that the church will ever disavow Doctrine and Covenants 132?
That's a good question. Well, I don't know about disavow.
They've already
I mean,
changed it
every
to
time
make
it
it sound
comes
more
up,
like
they say,
celestial
well, the
marriage than
manifesto, but the
polygamy.
manifesto is in Scripture, and
Right.
Doctrine and Covenants 132 is that correct?
Right. Now, I could see them removing it from the DNC, but I don't think that would be a disavow of the doctrine. That's just the way they handle history. They always kind of slide out without making direct statements about what they're doing.
Yeah, they always say, well, we don't do that, but it's...
Well, they actually do still believe polygamy, and it is still endorsed in the
That's
church.
what they said.
Because if a man outlives his wife, he can go to the temple and be sealed to his next wife, and according to the Mormons, he will be a polygamist in heaven. Polygamy is still a doctrine of the church, and several of their apostles have remarried after their wife died and married in the temple and are looking forward to living polygamy in heaven.
Well, you know, Sandra, for whatever it's worth, I admire your work. You're a brave lady.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Agreed. Thank you for calling. Okay, line 3, we have Roland from Provo. Hello, Roland. And you need to turn down your volume.
I read many of the books about Joseph Smith's translation process. Like the other gentleman said, for instance, that how can any person write a book like that by looking into a hat?
Yes.
I mean, I know no man knows my history, and books have been written about trying to explain how Joseph Smith came up with a book like that. Now, I read all the books, and there is religious instructions in there that are unique. They are uplifting, they are true, and they are wonderful description. And how can a boy looking into a hat do that without some other help that we don't understand how? There's so many. The history of the Jews is being used and all this. This has all been proven to be just assumptions. There's no proof what he used. He was so uneducated. Emma herself said that he couldn't write a sentence, he didn't.
Yes, but that is not a factual statement. Emma was trying to make him look more stupid than he really was, to make it all seem like God was involved. But we have a sample of Joseph Smith's handwriting from 1832, and it is an educated hand. It's better handwriting than most of the kids write today. I don't think he was that uninformed.
The funny thing is that all those that apostatized of his early helpers, even the Llewellyn book, William McMillan's books, they always apostatized and denounced Joseph for what they thought was wrong, but they never denounced the Book of Mormon.
Well, I believe Oliver Cowdery did.
They all believed in the Book of Mormon to be true.
Well, first off, there are people that leave the polygamous groups that still believe polygamy is true. So just the fact that people leave and still believe doesn't mean anything.
It cannot be explained away by saying, well, he did this and he did this. Well, there's more to it than we understand. And
there is no historical evidence that the Lehi crowd ever arrived in America. There's absolutely nothing historical to support that book.
There's nothing historical at all to support it. Not the animals, not the coins, not the time, not the place, nothing.
Right.
There's not a shred of evidence for the Book of Mormon. Okay, let's go quickly to a question that a member asked again about this polygamy of Joseph Smith and his having children. And this is the question that the member asked, and then we'll give Turley's response. The question was, one woman said the child that she bore, she didn't know if it was the child of Joseph Smith or the child of, in this case, Orson Hyde, I think, an apostle. That was his polyandry. So that indicates that it was definitely not a spiritual marriage. It was an all-the-way marriage. So I have a question. What do you feel about that? And his question was to Turley.
Yes.
And that was his question. And Turley's response is this, quote, "It's true that Joseph Smith practiced plural marriage in that he had wives who were not married to anyone else. It's true that he practiced polyandry and he did have wives who were married to someone else." He never gave a personal answer to this guy at all, but is there an official statement on this from the church itself about his polygamy, kids from?
No, they don't give anything that specific. Now, the question is, at some point when the church finally puts up a list of his wives, how forthright they'll be about the union with the women. But a lot of Mormons will try to argue, well, that was just a name. He didn't really have relations with these women. He didn't have children by them. And yet we find that, for instance, one of his wives, Sylvia Sessions, who was married at the time she married Joseph Smith, at the end of her life, she was devout Mormon, came to Utah, everything. At the end of her life, she tells her daughter, Josephine, I named you Josephine because you're really Joseph Smith's child.
Right, right.
And so here we have one of his plural wives saying she had a child by Joseph Smith.
And others also admitted that they had sex with Joseph
right,
Smith.
Right, absolutely.
When
it was
came.
Marriage in actual fact.
So when Turley was pressed and continued to be pressed and almost forced into an answer whether polygamy was a current doctrine, he finally said, and I quote, and this is going on the screen, quote, "We do believe in polygamy." Speaking for the Mormon Church, he said, "We do believe in polygamy. We don't practice polygamy." That's what I'm trying to say. This came, now is this something that we can take to the bank? I mean, is this real?
Well, Mormons are going to say that they don't trust the recording probably of the interview, but that is the way the church historian said it to this room full of people in Sweden. And the recording is on the internet. You can listen to the whole recording.
For sure. Okay. Well, very quickly, we're getting close to the end. Dean from Salt Lake City. Dean, can you ask your question very quickly?
Yes. I was just wondering on that situation where Joseph Smith practiced polyandry. And I understand that their husband still lived with them, but what were they expected to do after that? Were they supposed to go and get another wife while their first wife was, married then to Joseph Smith? And do they still practice that today in the polygamous groups? Do they still do the same thing?
Some of the men did take other wives. Some of Joseph Smith's wives married Brigham Young, and some ended up living just with Brigham Young and forsaking their husband when they came west. And then the husbands, I think it was Sylvia Sessions' husband, wasn't it, that went off and married some woman in California?
That was Jacob's. Zena
Huntington,
yeah.
Jacob's husband. Yeah, she was a married woman, and she went and married Brigham when they came west after being married to Joseph, and her husband had to go off and find another wife then. I don't know how the polygamists do it.
Well, and the polygamists, they don't do polyandry, but the FLDS has reassigned women, know, and so they've kind of switched them around like that, making it very confusing, especially for the family and of the children. Well, we didn't get through it all, Sandra, but we got a good chunk out of it, and we appreciate our callers. Thank you for calling in. Thank you again. I'm sure that we'll have something to come back again later on. Malachi chapter 3, verse 6 says, I, the Lord, do not change. James 1:17 says, God does not change like shifting shadows. 1 Samuel 15:29 says, God does not lie or change his mind. John 10:35 says, the scripture cannot be broken. Matthew 5:18 says, Jesus said, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. All these scriptures and more in the Bible testify to an unchanging God and his unchanging word. How could we ever trust a God who changes his mind or changes his requirements for those who are seeking him? How can we ever trust a religion that does change with the times? And if God changes, does anyone have the right, only if God changes, no one has the right to change what he said or change doctrine, especially doctrine that is essential to the eternal souls of mankind. How do you, our viewers, dare to trust and place your eternal fate in a changing religion? Jesus himself said in John 3:11, I tell you the truth. We speak of what we know, and we testify to what we have seen, but still you people do not accept our testimony. How sad it will be for those who face Jesus Christ on Judgment Day, and they are forced to answer him, I didn't believe you, I believed my church instead. Jesus Christ said and made the claim, he said, I am the truth. Truth is important, folks. Truth matters. You can't play with it. And I would like to ask our viewers again, why don't you believe the truth? Good night.